Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jammin and Plannin Podcast. My name is Johnny Guitar Morgan, and I am the founder and managing member at Connected Consultants, as well as the creator and co-host of the Jammin and Plannin Podcast, alongside my incredibly talented co-host, fellow musician, founder, and managing partner at Staus Partners and friend, Mr. Scotty, kick drum Stathis.
I love our nicknames. Hey, John, I'm excited about today's discussion, and I'm really excited about our guest, who I'm sure will introduce himself shortly, but this should be a ton of fun.
Absolutely. And by the way, what a blast to meet you finally in person while you're in Fort Lauderdale. We got to meet Scott for the first time with his partner, Bob Mattel. And we met up at the Blue Jean Blues Bar, which was what a time. Wow, the band was rocking, the atmosphere was great, and I couldn't have had better company. So it was really great to finally meet you in person. And I'm looking forward to the day that I get to meet you, Scott MacKillop, in person instead.
That's right. I feel like we've known each other for years and years now. So it feels like we've met, but we never have. That's right.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that whole meeting worked out perfectly. I was down in Fort Lauderdale for business. I was with my business partner, and John said, let's meet. And I said, well, I found a place with live music. How about that? It's like perfect, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, the band was jamming. But that's a whole nother story. But most importantly of all, today we have the absolute honor and pleasure of introducing our Jammin and Plannin Podcast community to one of my favorite human beings on planet Earth, Mr. Scott Flat-Fee OG MacKillop. When I think of a life well lived, Scott is someone who definitely comes to mind. Frankly, we don't have nearly enough time to hear about all of the incredible life adventures he has been on so far, but we are definitely going to give it a try. Let's start with a few fun facts. Scott started his career actually as a securities lawyer in my hometown of Washington, D.C. He served as president or CEO of 5 turnkey TAMPs and 1 consulting firm. He's known as the godfather of flat-fee asset management after starting the first ever flat-fee TAMP known as First Ascent Asset Management, which recently merged with GeoWealth. Scott is a creative adventurer, an avid mountain climber, successful entrepreneur, musician, writer, mentor, family man, leader, and friend to all who have had the pleasure to get to know him. So without further ado, please give a warm Jammin and Plannin welcome to my good buddy, Scott MacKillop. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that introduction. That made my day. That actually made my year, I think. That was quite something, John. Thank you.
Well, as one of the hosts,
we have some anthem music when you say that.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, I know.
That was something
good.
in the background for sure. That's coming, to a future episode. We're
Okay.
always looking for great ideas. So there's our first one of the episode today. All right. Well, I know we've got a lot to get into, so let's get straight at it. Most importantly, of interest to our musical and musicians out there, how did you first become interested in music, Scott? When did this adventure begin?
Yeah, it started pretty early in my life. I mean, I remember back in 2nd, 3rd grade, I used to listen to the AM radio and rock and roll. That was back in the 50s, so a long time ago. But then when the so-called British invasion started and the Beatles appeared, the first rock concert I ever went to was a Beatles rock concert at the Cow Palace. But the area where I was growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area was just a hotbed of music. There were Jerry Garcia was a local guitar teacher, and I ended up taking guitar lessons from him. And Janis Joplin's band played at our high school for a dance, and Jefferson Airplane opened up. They played at a hotel opening in Palo Alto, and it was just it was everywhere. Santana and Grateful Dead played for free in parks nearby. So there was music everywhere, and I just got caught up in it. But it was particularly, I think, when the British invasion started that I really got serious about actually playing music.
And what was the first instrument? Was it a guitar?
Well, yeah, it was. So I originally I was a big Paul McCartney fan, and I wanted to play the bass, but my dad talked me out of it. He said you can't play the bass by yourself. You know, you can't go to a party and just play the bass. So why don't you try the guitar first and see how you like it? So that's how I got to play the guitar, and I do play bass sometimes now, but mostly I'm a guitar player. Yeah.
That's great. And I love the fact that you saw Santana. I saw them in concert. Wow. Woo!
Yeah.
If you like percussion, it doesn't get any better than that. What's your favorite genre of music?
I'm still just a straight ahead rock and roll guy. You know, that's really my favorite. I mean, if you give me the one concert that I go to pretty much every year, I'll find a Tedeschi Trucks, kind of concert somewhere here at Red Rocks or somewhere nearby. But I love that music still. Prefer it over pretty much anything else.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Scotty.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. You're speaking my language, and hey, taking guitar lessons from Jerry Garcia. How many people can say that?
Well, there were, he actually taught at two different places in my hometown area, and so there were actually I ran into a guy in college that also had taken guitar lessons from him too. So just back then, before the Dead became popular, that's how he made his money. So.
I have a buddy who I'm an avid mountain biker, so I mountain bike all the time. And this guy, I was mountain biking with him for 3 years, and he would disappear for like 4 months at a time. Then he'd come back, and I'd say, "Ken, where were you?" And he said, "Well, I travel a lot for business." Took 3 years for him to tell me that he was the guitar technician for the Rolling Stones, and he's been on tour with them for like 15 years.
Wow! Yeah. Wow.
And
what a great job.
This was the first year that he's not doing it in over 15 years.
Yeah.
So he finally quit, and he caught COVID from Mick Jagger last year when they were on tour. Jagger came to practice with COVID and was just belting out songs, and 50% of the people in the room got COVID, including my buddy. But that's a crazy story. So Scott, are you like in a band? So
now I play in a worship band at my church. So I'm a card-carrying Christian guy, and I play with the band there. I played probably 5 or 6 different worship bands over the years, depending upon where I lived and so forth. And so most of the people I play with are, in their 30s, or sometimes even younger. But I'm still the old guy who hangs around and plays. It's mostly kind of Christian rock, and we do some hymns once in a while. But yeah, it's pretty fun music.
That's cool. Have you been in like a rock band that played out at dive bars and stuff like that?
Yeah, I have been, although really I was on the very low end of the food chain there. When I was in high school, we had a band that played, actually we played at Magoo's Pizza Parlor in Menlo Park, which was, I think, also one of the first places that the Grateful Dead played. But it was, it was like just a local pizza place. And then when I moved here to Colorado, I joined a band that really came out of a group that met through guitar lessons that we were taking from the same teacher, and we played some gigs. But we were definitely not. Nobody was booking us to play in stadiums or anything like that. So it was just
But I hear you played in Coors Field.
Yeah, I did that too. Yeah, we played again. This was one of the worship bands that I played with. We played after a baseball game. In Coors Field. So that was a pretty big venue. So I have played a stadium. So that's pretty funny. Yeah.
You stand corrected.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So go ahead,
John.
Scott. Sorry.
Yeah, no, so one quick funny thing, Scott, you mentioned growing up in California and being, having exposure to all these great musicians. So Gary Perez is the CEO of USC Credit Union, and I've done some work with him. So he grew up in the LA area, and he used to go see Van Halen when they were just like a garage band, literally. And they started getting more and more popular, and they used to throw like yard parties, right? And he said he was one of the last yard parties that they threw. They got so popular that there were hundreds and hundreds of people. Yeah. And the police came to try and break it up, and everybody's like, no way, this is too good. We're not stopping, right? Van Halen wouldn't stop playing. They're all drinking kegs of beer. They wouldn't listen to the cops, so that The cops radioed into headquarters. They got a police helicopter, flew over the crowd, the helicopter lowered over the band. The drum kit and everything else went flying off the stage, and they're like, "Uncle, Uncle!" already.
Yeah.
And they broke up the concert. So Gary Perez was there, and he tells me the story. Right? Crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think this is how a lot of these guys got started. You know, I remember seeing at least one or two of those kinds of scenes in the Menlo Park, Palo Alto area, where, you know, all of a sudden people, I don't even know how they knew that this thing was happening, but it was, you know, an event, and all of a sudden there's hundreds of people around, and some band that you've never heard of, but you would later hear of would be playing.
Yeah, and that was before social media. Imagine if that happened today, right? It would
Yeah,
be crazy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, out of
All
control.
right, John.
So you've got so many amazing stories, but what are some of the funniest and best stories that you can legally share with our audience today?
About music stuff. I think the oddest time that I ever played was I was down in La Paz, Mexico one time on vacation with my family, and I was a teenager, and I met some guy down there who was about my age. Probably we were, I don't know, maybe 16, 17, something like that. And I snuck out with him, and we went to this dive bar in La Paz, Mexico, and there was a rock band playing there. And somewhere along the way, I had told this fellow that I played guitar, and so he arranged for me to play with this rock band in Mexico. And that was pretty wild. There was a lot of cerveza being consumed, and I'm not sure that the quality of the music was all that good, but it was really fun. And
that sounds amazing.
People really enjoyed the music, so it was fun.
Well, as long as the audience is drinking the cerveza and tequila, then I'm sure they thought it was really good.
No, I think that increased the quality of the music that I was playing dramatically.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Scott, what do you got there?
Well, I mean, so the theme of this podcast is obviously music, but talking to people out of the financial services industry that are professionals and also play music, right? So we have our alter egos.
Yeah.
The three of us share that as a passion, but sometimes there's an intersection between the two, and it gets kind of cool, right? Have you ever had the opportunity to combine your music passion with work passion?
Yeah, there was a time, it was some years ago, but back when I was president of PMC, which is now part of the InvestNet organization, we had a big Christmas party in Denver, and I dressed up as Santa Claus. I had a full Santa Claus suit on, the beard and everything. Now I have a real beard, but back then my beard wasn't white. And we hired the Hazel Miller Blues Band, which probably most of you have never heard of, but they back in the day in Denver, they were a pretty hot band, and they played at our Christmas party. And somewhere along the line, I got up and ended up playing with the Hazel Miller Blues Band. So, you know, there I was representing PMC at the Christmas party, but also a temporary band member there with Hazel Miller. So that was a lot of fun.
That's cool. And so how did your work colleagues react to that?
I went back in preparation for getting together with you guys. I went back and looked at some pictures of it, and they were rocking out. You know, there was definitely some dancing and some good times being had. So yeah, I think people were enjoying the music.
Yeah, that's one thing I think we're gonna try to incorporate as much as possible. Is Scott shared some of the pictures, and they're hilarious and just great memories. And so that'd be something cool that we could do, you know, as we're posting along the way, maybe add a couple of old pictures of folks rocking and rolling and doing their thing back in the day. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. So to switch gears now, because we are shorter on time, let's talk about your work history. So I know you've done so much as a president and CEO of multiple TAMPs, but I think your grand story behind your work life is obviously the creation of the first flat fee TAMP, First Ascent Asset Management. So tell us a little bit about how that adventure began, and maybe your top two lessons coming out of that amazing experience.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was pretty straightforward. I was serving as president of a different TAMP, and I was just thinking about our business, and you know, it's one of those things that I think we should all do more often is actually just stop, take a time out in the middle of the day and just think about your business and what you're doing and how you're doing it, and ask yourself, is this the best way? Or are there maybe some other ways where you could do things instead of just doing the same thing that everybody else has always done? And so that's what I did when we started First Ascent. Was of course, there were lots of financial advisors that were starting to charge flat fees, but there were no asset management firms and certainly no TAMPs that were doing that. And so I started thinking about how that model would work in the TAMP world. And to me, it made perfect sense that it would work very well, and it would benefit clients and benefit advisors. Just because we could keep the pricing relatively low and very transparent. People would always know what they were going to pay. And we had a series of other ideas that were associated with First Ascent that were kind of novel, I'd say. But we probably don't have time to go into all of that right now. But the pricing was just dramatically different than what everybody else was doing. And my partners at the firm I was at weren't interested in exploring the flat fee environment, so I left and gathered some other folks together, and we started First Ascent and grew that business to a good size. And then, as you mentioned, we sold it to GeoWealth and became part of the GeoWealth family. So top two lessons, I would say, are not particularly earth-shaking, but I would say keep it simple, whatever you're trying to do. Especially these days, it seems the more complicated the idea, the more difficult, difficulty people have understanding what it is. The flat fee thing had the beauty of being very, very easy to understand, right? We didn't have to explain what the benefit even was. Everybody could see what the benefit was. And so that simplicity, and we took that theme throughout what we did, whether it was the portfolio onboarding technology that we developed or whatever it was. We tried to keep things simple and not try to show off and show everybody how smart we were, but just really keep things as simple as possible so that clients could easily adapt to what we were doing. The other thing is probably even less insightful in some ways, and it's just like work hard. It's gonna, whatever it is you do, whatever it is you think you're gonna do, or however brilliant you think your idea is, right? You're gonna have to work way harder than you thought you were. There's no easy path. I mean, especially these days, as Scott mentioned, with social media and so forth, it's a really, really noisy world, and everybody's competing for bandwidth. And so whatever timetable you set for your business growth and so forth, it's probably going to take 2 or 3 times as long as you think it is, and you'll encounter lots of other obstacles along the way. So you have to be kind of a tough person, who can grit it out and keep pedaling when everybody else is dropping out. And so keep it simple and work really hard. Those are my, if I had a team of people who totally internalized that and believed that, I could do anything.
It's interesting as I'm listening to you talk is I'm thinking about music, and you've probably had these discussions with musician friends, and that is that there are some amazing musicians out there that never make it, right? And then there are other musicians that are okay musicians, but they know how to write a catchy earworm, and they're huge, right? And what is an earworm? It's kind of creating a simple melody, right? Keeping it simple melody. That's what's successful. It's not all the intricate stuff. I mean, you can be a phenomenal musician, like I said, and never make it. Come up with a simple melody. You're
no, I totally agree. I mean, I don't actually think of my business life and my music life as 2 different things. I look at them as really just part of the same thing. It's the creative energy that we all have coming out in different ways. And sometimes it comes out in a business environment, and sometimes it comes out in music. For me, sometimes it comes out in writing, it comes out different ways, but it's the same thing. You look at the world and you say, what could be there? What could exist that doesn't exist right now? And you create something, you make something. And I think as you point out, sometimes, keeping it simple really helps, because then other people can enjoy what you're doing and understand what you're doing. And there's not a famous musician or a big band that didn't work really hard to get there. Whenever you see the backstories on these bands, there's not somebody who was born, to be great. You have to work at it. And so I think they're really just two parts of the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. They're relentless. What's interesting, and I have a question for you, but let me just premise it. What's interesting about differentiating yourself, right? Whether it's because you think of a simple concept and execute and work hard, or otherwise, is that
Yeah.
it's actually not that hard, but most people don't do it with purpose. So what I mean by that is 90% of everything is unremarkably uniform, right?
Yep.
10% is different, right? To be different, you only have to be 10% different.
Right. Yeah.
Literally, right? And
Yeah.
these days, I mean, so if you think enough about what you're doing and say, how can I make it just 10% different? How can I make my customer experience just 10% different?
Yeah.
Right? Then you're onto something, right?
Yeah.
Think how easy it is for a company to differentiate themselves these days and stand out, right? All they have to do is have a live person answer a telephone, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
they're differentiated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, I think that what you've hit on is exactly right. Everybody talks about how difficult it is to differentiate. And at one level, it is because of that 90% that you're talking about. There's a lot of similarity in what people do. But there's two things. One is what I mentioned earlier. You have to actually think about your business. You have to stop just doing it, and you have to
Yeah.
step aside and think about it. And then you have even more importantly, you have to do away with the fearfulness that most people have about stepping out and being different. You have to be willing to do something that nobody else is doing. Obviously, it's like such an obvious idea, right? To be different, you have to be different. But people
Yeah.
are very fearful of doing that because they look around and they go, well, nobody else is doing that, or nobody else is saying that. I can't do that. But you just have to, again, this is, I think, part of the creative process. You have to just let it go and see what happens. And you don't have to get it right the first time, every time, right? There's a lot of experimentation that goes on, certainly in music, but also in business. You don't, go immediately from your business plan to a great success. Your business plan is just the first stepping stone, and then you start experimenting through doing things, and you get feedback and you adjust and so forth. But anyway, that's I think you're exactly right. It's just like you have to not be afraid.
Well, and so my question for you about that is you made a dent in the industry with your flat fee structure, right? So what do you want that kind of lasting impression to be of what you've done and what's next?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I set out to try to do with my colleagues at First Ascent was just to change a little part of the world. I think especially these days, as the financial advisory business has gotten, grown way beyond just being a portfolio manager or an investment manager. Now advisors are doing financial planning, estate planning, all kinds of things. One person can't do everything. So this whole idea of outsourcing some aspects of what you're doing, it may be investment management or it may be other things, I think is really important for, especially for smaller firms to grow. And so I was just trying to, since that's the part of the financial services world I lived in, I was just trying to make that part of the world a little better and a little easier for financial advisors through the flat fee process and through other things that we did. And so that's really what I would like the legacy of First Ascent to be, is just to have other people, whether it's through flat fees or some other creative idea that they have, is how are you going to make more for yourself? That's good, more power to you if you can be rich, but how are you going to make the world a better place? How are you going to take your skills and the gifts you've been given and try to make things better for the people that you serve? And that's just that's a the way I look at the world and the way I've always tried to do business. And so that's what I hope it is. It's people go, oh, flat fees. That was good for the clients and that was good for the advisors. Maybe I'll do flat fees or maybe I'll do some other thing. But that's really, it's just like, how can we get financial services to be really more of service and less about financial, and serving clients. To me, that's the fun of it.
Well, I think I always say the more you try and sell, the less you sell. The more you try and help, the more you sell, right? And so we live in a value for value economy. And if you provide value because you're making things easier, you're ultimately making it better for the end client, et cetera, you should get value in return. And the value system we live in is you get monetary remuneration as it should be, right? So it's good that the system works most of the time, and good for you for making a dent in the industry and having a positive impact.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's just, it's one of those things. I think the message is for people to just sort of stop and think about what you're doing and think about how you might do it better. And you read every day, people write articles about improving client experience and how to do that. And I think the more people give thought to that idea and the more creative they are in bringing ideas to the client base, the better off they'll be. People will react positively to that.
Yeah, I agree so much. And it was also great that you were able to make it a family affair at First Ascent.
Yeah.
Really great. So that legacy of your kids working with you, your wife.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really cool as well.
Yeah.
We got to keep things moving here. So I wanted to touch on another one of your passions. I know how much you love hiking and mountain climbing and adventuring.
Oh, yeah.
And so when did that interest start? How did it start? And tell us a little bit about your journey and maybe some of the craziest stories you can share of your adventures on the mountain.
Well, it started back in, I think I was about 15 years old. I had a friend in high school who during the summers, he would go off with this group and do burro trips through the Sierra Mountains. And he was called the Burro Boy because he was responsible for taking care of the burros. And he said, hey, why don't you come on one of these trips? So I asked my parents and they signed me up and I went on one of these trips and it was magnificent. I just loved it. And I was helping him with the burros along the way. And then the guy that was the leader of this organization said, hey, do you want to be a burro boy and just spend the whole summer out here with us? And I said, sure. So I spent a whole summer out in the Sierras, taking pack trips through the mountains there, and just totally fell in love with it. So that's where I got started. And then when I got out here to Colorado, of course, there's quite a few mountains to climb. So that's where it really took off for me, is when I got out here. And I have to here give credit to my my mountain mentor Skip Schweiss, who was a monster mountain climber, and he really encouraged me, and we've climbed a lot of mountains together and done a lot of hiking. So, but my craziest story was actually kind of a dark, grim story. This was before I moved to Colorado. I lived in Atlanta at the time, and I came out to Colorado and was trying to climb a 14er, and I didn't really have the experience or the equipment to do it right. And it was a pretty difficult 14er to climb. And I just badly miscalculated all the way along. The equipment, the amount of food and water I had, everything. So I ended up climbing, got to the summit, and then started down, and it started to get dark. And there was a rainstorm. I won't go into all the details, but I ended up wandering around on the side of this mountain till 3 a.m. in a driving rainstorm, trying to find the trail and find my way down. And it was pretty scary. And I remembered that on the way up the trail, there were all these warning signs about bears. So I imagined that I was probably going to be eaten by a bear. It would be the easiest meal that bear ever had. I would just walk right into its den. But that was a pretty crazy story.
That's amazing. Yeah, and Skip is such a mountain climber. I think he's been to the top of every single 14K, right?
Yeah, he's climbed all the 14ers here in Colorado, which is, depending upon how you count, it's in the low 50s, so that's a lot of
that's insane.
And he's climbed a lot of them multiple times. So
all right, moving ahead. Scotty.
Yeah, I mean, that story is, you probably had potential hypothermia, right? All that kind
Oh
of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. No, I tried to. I could not find the trail, and um I climbed into a hollow log and laid down to try to just wait until the sun came up, and I started shivering, and I realized I was going to die if I just lay there. So I got up uh, and kept moving, and about 15 feet up the side of the mountain, I found the trail finally. So I was
Wow.
able to get down. But yeah, I was in danger of hypothermia exit from this stage here.
And becoming a Happy Meal.
Yeah, I was either a Happy Meal or I was going to be an ice cube, one or the other. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, the one thing that I share with you is experience in the Sierra. So I lived out in San Francisco for 7 years and did a ton of backpacking in the Sierra, mostly in Yosemite, off high
Uh-huh.
or the high country. But
Yep.
man, it's that is truly a religious experience.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it really is. I think John Muir, he's got the trail named after him now, but I think he was very inspired by that area
Oh yeah,
and wrote a
no,
lot
it's
about it. Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So what do you want to spend the next phase of your life doing? Because you're technically not working right now, right?
Yeah, technically I'm not working. I left GeoWealth. We got the integration of First Ascent and GeoWealth done, and then it was really time for me to move on, find my next adventure. So I'll keep playing music with my band, and as work, I'm kind of open to my next new adventure. I want it to be something where we can make a difference in the world and make the world a little bit better place, where there's a lot of creativity and good chemistry for me, hopefully. But I think I bring a lot of experience in building businesses and working with advisors, and so I'm just looking for the right match there. Somebody who's interested in a slightly older guy who's just got a lot of experience and brings hopefully some good team building and business building
Age is a state of mind, and
talents.
you don't have
Yeah.
an old state of
Yeah.
mind. That's
Yeah, no,
No,
I
beautiful.
don't
not
have
at
an old state of
all.
mind. No, it's weird to be
Yeah.
trapped in this somewhat aged body and have the energy. I still climb 14ers and I
Yeah.
still do all the stuff I used to do. And so I'm waiting for the curtain to come down, but so far it hasn't. So I'm just
Yeah.
Good.
I'm
That's the
powering along.
key. That's the key is never stop. That was the
Yeah.
Yeah.
biggest mistake I made was stopping basketball because as soon as I did and sat around the house working out of the house, my body changed and not for
Yeah.
the better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
going back is so difficult now, and most people won't. So now I switched to tennis, but that's another story. So
Yeah.
we're moving along here because we're getting ready to get a little long here. Um, so, last question. What
Yep.
is one thing that your work colleagues would be surprised to learn about you?
Well, let's see. So as you pointed out earlier, I started out as a lawyer and I moved into the asset management world. But in between, I had this brief period where I was doing a lot of work in the venture capital area, and I raised some money for a firm that sold a little tiny handheld computer device that helped people quit smoking. And we tried to sell that through health and wellness programs and so forth, and didn't go anywhere. And so we ended up being big infomercial guys. So we sold little tiny credit card size quit smoking devices on late night television through infomercials. And probably I'm the only guy that that has done that. So yeah, and
That is
that's not
hilarious.
that doesn't usually appear on my resume when I write up my bio. So.
Did the thing zap you or something? How did it?
No, it was a gradual withdrawal program. It was actually very effective. Harvard did a study on it, and it was the most effective self-help device at the time to
Wow.
get people to quit smoking. Yeah, it was kind of this weird thing because the science behind it was tremendous. The technology behind it at the time was amazing because this was a small handheld computer at a time when computer technology was pretty new. And yet we were we were selling it on late night TV, where you'd watch some old movie and 2 a.m, a little commercial for
Yeah.
product would come on. So it was a weird combination. But we had, I don't know if you remember, E.G. Marshall was a famous actor back in the day, and Lauren Hutton was a model. They were both did infomercials for us. So
I have to say, this was so much fun. As you know, most people may not know, but I talk about this, when I was thinking about the Jammin and Plannin podcast and thinking, would this work? Would this be something people are interested in? You were one of the people that I went to early on to talk about it. And you were one of the people that really pushed me and said, you've got to do this. And of course, once I did, you were at the top of the list of one of the guests I wanted to have on, because I knew you were a musician and had such an amazing adventure of a life. So I want to first and foremost, thank you so much for being a friend, a colleague, and for joining us here today on the Jammin and Plannin podcast. You're the perfect guest for us. And again, I just really appreciate you as a colleague and friend of mine over the years, and really happy to have you on the show. And Scott, any parting words?
Yeah, sure. I have a friend. So Scott and I can relate to this more than you, John. I have a friend who's getting up there too, but he's in phenomenal shape, and he says it's weird being the same age as old people.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me on the show. I mean, when you were first thinking about it, John, as you mentioned, we talked about it, and I think it's a great way to get people out of their financial service shell and the little world that we tend to operate in and talk about, and get people talking about the other things in their lives that are in some ways bigger and more important, and make you get a more complete understanding of a person when you understand things outside of just their their work world. So thank you.
I think there's a theme. There's a theme to this discussion. It's play music, stay active, and die young as late as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm working on that plan. I'm working on that. Yeah.
And then the last thing about that, and one thing that you said to me recently, is this has kind of got you a little bit out of your comfort zone. And so I want to make sure that our audience knows to stay tuned, because right after we end this show today, Scott is going to perform live. Well,
yeah, that's right. My first ever public singing debut. So that'll be. We'll see what happens. Hope they can't throw tomatoes at me because I'm virtual. So
exactly. Well, we know you did a great job, and I'm excited for everybody to hear you. And again, thank you all for joining us today. It was really a blast of a show. And in the meantime, we want you to certainly stay out there and make sure you're jamming
and planning.
Yeah.
All right,
there you
guys.
go.
Have a great day.
All right.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Scott. That was great.
Hello, all you Jammin and Plannin podcast people. I'm going to sing a song by Ray LaMontagne called I Was Born to Love You. A couple things before we get started. One is I'm not used to playing by myself, so I'm used to playing with a band. So I recorded a little rhythm track and then overdubbed some lead lines over the top of that. So you'll hear some other guitars while I'm playing for you. And second thing is, I've never sung in public before. This is a first, and I'm only doing it because John Morgan asked me to do it. I apologize to you and to Ray LaMontagne ahead of time, but let's get going and see how it all goes. it through. We tasted the rough, so let's savor the smooth. All the time I was hurting you. Got to believe that I was hurting you too. I was born in love. I was born in love. I was born in love. I was born to. You're the only one I can talk to. The only one I can really read. I know you give because you want to. Don't you think it's time you let yourself receive? Make you smile, I can make you sing. Just want to give back a little bit of what you give to me. I could sing you a song, play you a tune. Just a little thing, but it's something I can do. I was born alone. I was born to. I was born in love. I was born to. I was born. I was born to love you. I was born. I was born to love you.
We want to thank you all for joining us today.
And we hope you had as much fun tuning in as we did putting it all together.
Don't forget to check out the links below to hear what we are all working on musically.
And hey, while we always have amazing guests lined up for our episodes, please let us know if you would like to be a guest or if you know somebody who should be.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast series today.
And until next time,
Keep on jamming.
and keep on planning.